Okay, so we're going to be looking at the animal cell and the plant cell and the similarities that they have in their organelles. Okay, so organelles are basically structures that are found within cells. So we looked at cells as living organisms, and they all have organelles inside them, which are very important to allow a cell to actually perform its various functions. Okay, so we need to understand what are these organelles and what are their functions. All right, so we're going to start with the plant and the animal cell and what they have in common. So the very first structure that both cells will have in common is we have an endoplasmic reticulum, and they both have a nucleus. Okay, now very important, a nucleus is what will distinguish whether a cell is prokaryotic or eukaryotic, because remember we said that prokaryotic cells are cells that do not have a nucleus or lack a true nucleus, and eukaryotic cells are cells that have a nucleus. So in this case, we are dealing with animal and plant cells that have a nucleus, and we refer to them as eukaryotes. Okay. We also have ribosomes, so they share that in common with each other, and we're going to look at the structure of the ribosome. And then we have the endoplasmic reticulum. Another word to shorten it, we would say it's ER. And we have a Golgi apparatus, we have a plasma membrane, and we have a cytoplasm. Yeah, so those are all the structures that are common to both plant and animal cells. But then we have differences where then we are able to identify what makes a plant cell different from a animal cell. Okay, and that will be distinguished based on the cell wall. So a plant cell has a cell wall, and an animal cell has what we call a cell membrane. So it does not have a cell wall. And we'll look at the structures of the cell wall as well as the cell membrane and how they actually differ from each other. And we're going to look at various other structures that are very important, such as the lysosome. So lysosomes are basically just digestive enzymes that will basically break down substances within the cytoplasm of the cell. Basically digesting them. And so let's look at this quickly, and let's look at the structure. Let's start with the structure of the cell wall, since it's the main this is present within plant cells. So the cell wall is a rigid outer layer of plant cells. It surrounds the cell membrane. The cell wall is non-living and is made up of cellulose. So remember we said that cellulose is a polysaccharide. Okay, so it's basically a complex carbohydrate that basically allows the cell to have an outer protective layer and makes the cell wall rigid. Okay, and it will basically protect what is inside. So that is what it is made up of, and it is non-living, and it is completely permeable to water and minerals. So permeable means that water and mineral salts can pass through fully, right? So can pass through a permeable membrane because it's fully permeable to that. It won't prevent water and minerals from actually entering. They'll allow it fully because plants do need water. Openings in the cell wall contain strands of cytoplasm called the plasmodesmata. Now the plasmodesmata is basically just little openings that the cell wall will have. We refer to that as plasmodesmata, and they connect to the adjacent cells. So if we have another cell that is next to another plant cell next to another plant cell, then that will be the adjacent cells that we are talking about. Okay, so the cell wall of a plant cell is joined to other cell walls by a thin layer of material called the middle lamella. All right. So functions. What are the functions of the cell wall? So it protects the inner parts of the plant cell and gives plant cells a more uniform and regular shape. As you can see over there, plant cells have a much more rigid shape as compared to an animal cell, which we'll look at, because animal cells just have a cell membrane. So it provides support for the whole plant body. So each and every cell, plant cell, they will actually have shape and they will have support based because of the cell wall. So this is the cell wall, and these are its basic functions. Right. So now let's look at the cell membrane. And a cell membrane is present in the animal cell, and the cell membrane surrounds the cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm is the fluid-filled space within an animal cell. So that blue part over here, which basically gets filled up with various organelles. Right, so it is part of the protoplasm, which is the living part of the cell. So we refer to that as so in between there's a living part of the cell, and that is the protoplasm. And the protoplasm is found in the cytoplasm. Okay, so the cell membrane consists of mostly of lipid and protein molecules. It is semi-permeable and controls the movement of substance into and out of the cell. So that means semi-permeable refers to when a cell basically takes in what it needs and does not allow foreign substances to enter, because foreign substances can be harmful to it. So it's like a sieve that takes in what it needs and basically leaves out the unwanted substances, or because there are certain substances that are too big or certain molecules that are too big, and it won't necessarily just allow it to go through or pass through. So that is semi-permeable, meaning half. Okay, so it's partially permeable. Okay, so it's not fully permeable, and it controls the movement of substance into and out of the cells. And a nice way to explain this is by using the fluid mosaic model. Okay, so the fluid mosaic is a commonly accepted model that describes the arrangement of lipid and protein molecules in cell membrane. Okay, so here we have an example of, this is a fluid mosaic model, and this basically represents the cell membrane. So there we have the extracellular space and the intracellular space. So extra is what is outside of the cell membrane, and intra is what is going to be inside the cell membrane. When it passes through the cell membrane. Okay, so here we have a phospholipid bilayer. We refer to this whole bilipid layer. This is a bilayer. Bi means two, so it's two layers, and it's called phospholipid. So phospho means that it contains phosphorus, and lipid means that it's basically a fatty layer, so it consists of fat. And in between, we have these little tails over here, and these tails are hydrophobic, so they are scared of water, so they won't allow water to they are hydrophobic. Okay, so they are scared of water. And then we have the heads that we see over here, these ball-shaped structures. They are called hydrophilic heads. Okay, so hydrophilic means that they accept water. All right, they accept water, and that they're going to be along the inside, in between the hydrophobic heads, and that is basically what makes up the phospholipid bilayer. Okay, so protein molecules are randomly embedded in the phospholipid bilayer. This contributes to the mechanical strength of the membrane. Each protein molecule shifts around on the fluid bilayer of phospholipid. Okay, so think of substances that need to enter the cell membrane. For example, if we take water itself, water needs to travel through the membrane if the cell is willing to accept the water molecules. Okay, so then it will basically get facilitated or transported through the cell membrane. And as you can see over here, that our hydrophilic heads accepts water, but then we have a problem because the hydrophilic tails does not accept water or is hydrophobic. Okay, so then it will need proteins that can facilitate the transport of water into the membrane. Okay, and then in order to reach the intercellular matrix. Okay, so we'll have certain types of proteins here that can allow for H2O to actually enter the intracellular matrix. Okay, so that's the proteins that they are talking about here, and they are embedded on the phospholipid bilayer to act as facilitator proteins to facilitate the movement of to facilitate the movement of whatever substance that needs to actually enter via the cell membrane. Okay, so that process that I just basically talked about is the process of diffusion. Okay, so the process of diffusion is the movement of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration down a concentration gradient. Okay, so what I just did now is that if H2O were to pass down, get transported down into this intracellular matrix, and let's for example say the concentration of water is very high, so then there's like a lot of H2O molecules, all right, and that's a high concentration. So diffusion is the process whereby substances get diffused from a high concentration to a low concentration. So that means there's less than what came in before. All right, so that is very important when we are looking at diffusion, and it goes with down a concentration gradient, which means that it goes with gravity. Okay, it goes down with gravity. So diffusion will continue until all molecules are spread out evenly and a state of equilibrium is reached. Okay, so we also want to make sure that there's a state of equilibrium between the amount of substances in the intracellular matrix and the amount of substances in the on the outside of the cell membrane. Okay, so that is what we refer to as equilibrium. Okay, so diffusion occurs in living and non-living systems, and is an example of passive transport. So that means no energy is needed in this case because it is going down a concentration gradient, and it does not require energy because gravity goes down with the substance. All right, hope that makes sense. All right, and then we have another very important process called osmosis. Osmosis is the movement of water molecules across a selectively permeable membrane from an area of high water potential to an area of low water potential. So, and it will go down a water potential gradient until equilibrium is reached. So this is the wrong spelling here. I don't know what's wrong here, but equilibrium is also reached. So like for example, I used water as an example, but water is also a substance, but osmosis specifically refers to the movement of water across a selectively permeable membrane. So that is also going down a concentration gradient, going with gravity. All right. However, active transport is the movement of substances through a semi-permeable membrane in living cells against a concentration gradient, meaning it goes against gravity. So, and this will require energy in the form of ATP. So that is a very important process because now, if we look at, let me just go back here. if we look at this phospholipid bilayer, active transport will require energy. So basically it will be substances that are in very low concentration, and they will move up against the concentration, which will require energy, and in order to actually go from a low concentration to a high concentration against a concentration gradient. Okay, so that is active transport. Active transport will require energy. And then lastly, we have a nucleus. So the nucleus is the largest organelle in the cell and contains all the cell's genetic information in the form of DNA. So basically, DNA is genetic material that basically tells you what will be the color of your eyes, what will be the color of what will be the texture of your hair, all that. Okay, so the presence of a nucleus is the primary factor that distinguishes eukaryotes from prokaryotes. Okay, so a nucleus has four main parts. So the double nuclear membrane is this structure over here, and it encloses the nucleus and contains small pores to allow for the passage of substance in and out of the nucleus. So all these gaps that you see around the nuclear membrane, those are nuclear pores. Okay, and it also has a nucleoplasm. So a nucleoplasm is the space around the nucleus inside the nucleus. Okay, so it's basically jelly-like fluid within the nucleus. And the nucleolus is this structure over here. It's a dark spot body suspended in the nucleoplasm, which contains free nucleotide bases and produces ribosomes. Okay, so this is basically to be very important for producing ribosomes in order to basically make up protein. And we discussed that protein is very important since most of what we are is made up of protein. Okay, and the chromatin network is found in the nucleoplasm and contains the DNA, which forms the chromosomes containing the genetic code of a person. Okay, so basically this is chromatin. So it is loosely arranged inside the cytoplasm, but eventually they coil up to make up thread-like structures such as chromosomes. Okay, so this is the structure of the nucleus, and they like to ask this question. So please take note of the structure, that you know how to draw the structure, because they like to ask this. And then lastly, we have the cytoplasm. Now the cytoplasm is a jelly-like substance that fills the cell. It consists of up to 90% of water. So it's basically the fluid-filled space of animals and plant cells. Okay, and it consists of up to 90% water. It also contains dissolved nutrients and waste products. Okay, and waste products are going to be basically digested by lysosomes, which are digestive enzymes. Okay, its main function is to hold together the organelles which make up the cytoplasm. It also nourishes the cell by supplying it with salts and sugars and provides a medium for metabolic reactions to occur. Okay, so that is all for today, and I want you guys to go do these activities over here, which labels the structure and the functions of each and every organelle. Okay, and we'll discuss the rest of the organelles some other time. All right, so that is all for today. Make sure you watch this video and pause when you need to pause, and if you need more clarity, you can just ask. Okay, right, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.